Immigrant entrepreneurs bring in around 1.4 billion in business income each year in Colorado, and immigrants pay around 2.5 billion in state and local taxes each year. And it's really also important to remember, beyond the economic contributions that folks have, that immigrants are people. Immigrants are mothers and fathers and sons and daughters. They are business and faith leaders and care and service providers, and they are all essential to our state's economic prosperity and thriving communities.
Welcome back to another Colorado Connects, where we are joined by leaders and advocates in the community to talk about issues that interest the RMMFI community. I am very excited for our guest today. And Kate, I'm hoping you can introduce yourself and your role and what organization that you're coming from.
Of course. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much to RMMFI and Teresa for having us. My name is Kate Greuel. I use she, her, aya pronouns. I am a policy advocate with Spring Institute for Intercultural Learning. Spring is a nonprofit that has been in Central Denver for a long time, all the way since 1979. We started in English language education, and we have since expanded to many, many different kinds of programs. So we continue to have English language classes. We also have career pathways navigation programming for internationally trained professionals who want to re-enter their careers here in Colorado. We also have youth programming and home visiting programming. We have other navigation programs that support folks navigating the healthcare space and also navigating things like early childhood registration and enrollment. And then we have a very large translation and interpretation team within which we have dozens of contract interpreters and translators that help to promote language access in Colorado's communities. And I am part of our small but mighty advocacy team. And we do state level policy advocacy, again, focusing on issues informed by and impactful for refugee and immigrant communities in the state. And Spring Institute really is very, very grateful to work alongside a lot of wonderful communities in the state and a lot of wonderful partners. And we exist with the mission of building a thriving intercultural community through learning, language access, and advocacy. We're really excited to be speaking with you all today, and of course, happy to talk more about the work that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. You all are doing amazing stuff. And I know you're specifically engaged in advocacy at the state level this legislative session. So can you tell us a bit more about what bills, what policies, what budgets is Spring Institute leading or supporting this session?
Of course, yes, I'd be happy to. And I should say that sort of stepping back just from this session, our advocacy work currently focuses on three primary areas. One is language access, which is the ability for folks, no matter the language they speak or no matter what other communication barriers they may experience, they are able to access important information in a way that is meaningful and comfortable to them. The other two areas that we have been focusing on a lot recently in our general advocacy work is refugee and immigrant mental health, and also early learning and childcare opportunities for families who speak multiple languages and or languages other than English. So particularly for kiddos who are growing up in households where they're speaking one language at home and another at school, or multiple languages at home. And like I said before, we're really grateful to work alongside partners who are experts in many other areas as well, including areas of housing, tax credits, healthcare, many other spaces that we often step into as supporters, not necessarily leaders, sort of deferring to the expertise of other folks who really know those topics well. And part of that work includes, again, sort of group-based, community-based work through what we call coalitions. So coalitions are groups of community members and organizations who advocate around a specific issue in our case, related to welcoming and belonging for immigrants and refugees in Colorado. And we will share in the description some information about how folks can get involved in our advocacy coalitions. We do have 3 coalitions related to those 3 specific topics that we are primarily working in right now. So language access, refugee and immigrant mental health, and support for early learning and childcare for kiddos from families who speak multiple languages. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, most of our advocacy coalitions focus on state level legislation. Um, so stepping forward again from that broader overview, in terms of this session, we are most focused on state level legislation related to language access. Let me go ahead and share my screen here in a way that is hopefully helpful to folks. So I can talk through a little bit the language access bill that we are actively working on. This bill is House Bill 251153. It is called Statewide Government Language Access Assessment. And what it does is sort of exactly what the bill says. It is an assessment of current practice in language access at state agencies in Colorado. The assessment will compare current practice to standards in a statewide language access policy, which I'll talk about a little more in a moment. So the assessment will identify existing language access materials in contracts, will learn from state agencies the kind of guidance and support that they want and need to ensure meaningful language access to members of the public, determine what other groups, in addition to state agencies, should follow the state's language access policy. When I say state agency, what I'm referring to is actually what's typically called a department. So examples would be the Colorado Department of Public Health, the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, et cetera. Folks who often case administer programs and services for the public. And then the assessment will also produce a report sort of saying, all right, this is where things stand. This is where things could be improved in regards to language access at state agencies. This assessment will compare against standards in a language access policy, which will, not surprisingly, have to exist before the assessment itself will begin. And so on this screen, you can see sort of a step-by-step of the overall process. So step 2 here, as you can see, is the bill itself directing that assessment. The first step is the creation of an interim language access working group. This step is starting to happen as we speak. And that group will create the statewide language access policy. That group will be convened by the Colorado Office of New Americans and the Colorado Department of Personnel and Administration. It will be led and facilitated by a third-party language access expert. And most importantly, there will be multiple opportunities for members of the public to weigh in on that creation of the language access policy and say, this is how we think the language access policy should look. These are the kinds of things that should be included, et cetera. Once that is created, the assessment itself will begin, again, comparing current practice to the standards in that policy. And then the third step, which is directed by the bill but will happen in the future, is the creation of what's called a community of practice. And these are groups that exist in sort of other spaces for other topics, but basically what it is it's a group of community members, representatives of the community who will come together in an ongoing way to inform and help direct the implementation of the recommended improvements from that assessment report. And we'll say, hey, this is what we're seeing on the ground related to language access. This is how we can improve it in a long-term way. So that's the primary bill that we are working on as an agency and also as the Colorado Language Access Coalition. So again, for folks who are interested in joining that group, the Colorado Language Access Coalition, you would receive regular updates about things like that bill. In terms of other things that we are working on, so like I said, that's sort of our primary focus in terms of leading legislation. We are leading that bill, I should say, with our partners at the Colorado Center on Law and Policy, who are wonderful, wonderful folks with a lot of expertise in the policymaking process in Colorado. And the sponsors for that bill are Representative Velasco, Representative Joseph, and Senator Judah. And again, in the description, you can find a link to the bill itself, as well as to fact sheets about the bill if you want to learn more. In terms of legislation that we are following and supporting, but maybe not being as active in sort of leadership around, I'll just highlight a few. So one is called the Welcome, Reception, and Integration Grant Program, House Bill 25-1244. This bill builds on a similarly named bill from last year's session that created a grant program that partners, nonprofits, et cetera, could apply to provide services to newcomers in the state of Colorado. What this new bill does, it's very simple and very short, is it just creates a slight revision, expanding the sort of type of person that an organization could serve using this grant. So the original bill restricted it only to services for people who had been in the US for under a year. And this expands it and says recipients of the grant should be prioritizing people who have been here for 3 years or less. So that just expands it, offers some flexibility to folks who are administering the grant and who really have the best sense of what community needs are. Another bill that we are tracking and supportive of is the Colorado Voting Rights Act. That bill is much more extensive, and I won't talk about it at length. I will, however, highlight one piece of it that we are particularly excited about, and that is the expansion of language access in local elections. So what this bill would do is it would ask when a municipality, and I should say this same sort of ask already exists for counties when they administer elections. And it would extend to qualifying municipalities within those qualifying counties. But it would basically ask qualifying municipalities to provide a sample ballot online in a minority language and in-person ballots in that minority language in case folks ask for them. And what makes a language and a municipality qualifying is essentially if there are 2,000 individuals or 2.5% of the overall population of eligible voting citizens who speak a shared minority language and who have what is called limited English proficiency. Again, that is the Colorado Voting Rights Act, Senate Bill 25001. And then the last one that I'll just mention very briefly is House Bill 25-1274. This is the Healthy School Meals for All bill. What this bill does is it refers two ballot measures to Colorado voters to do two things. One is to keep existing funds for the Healthy School Meals for All program that were already raised from a previous proposition. And the second, to raise additional funds by further sort of reducing the tax deduction limits on earners making over $300,000 a year. And the reason that this is coming about is in part because this program has been more popular than anticipated and because of the increase in food costs due to inflation. The Healthy School Meals for All program offers free school lunch to all students if they would like to participate in that. So again, that is House Bill 25-1274, and we're excited about that one as well.
Thanks for sharing all those. And my final question for you is, how can interested entrepreneurs, how can people get involved and have their voice heard? I heard a few things in there that you were sharing. So making note about the Colorado Language Access Coalition and that there'll be public input on that bill. You mentioned some other Spring Institute coalitions, but would love to hear from you around how folks can get involved.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess first, what I'll start with is one of the best things that we can do, especially right now, is share facts about immigrants and immigration. So talk to people that you know, talk to people that you agree with, that you don't agree with, in a way that is, grounded in compassion and empathy and listening, but really ground what you are sharing in fact. We can link some resources in the description for folks who want to access some of these facts and some of these um, different sort of talking points that they can share with folks. But as an example, if we look at entrepreneurship in Colorado, 13% of all entrepreneurs in Colorado are immigrants. That's more than 45,000 people. Within that, 18% of Main Street businesses are owned by immigrants. And then when we think about sort of economic contributions more broadly, immigrant entrepreneurs bring in around 1.4 billion in business income each year in Colorado, and immigrants pay around 2.5 billion in state and local taxes each year. So again, a huge positive impact that our immigrant neighbors have on the state. And again, you can refer to the description for some more details and some more data and talking points on that. And it's really also important to remember, beyond the economic contributions that folks have, that immigrants are people. Immigrants are mothers and fathers and sons and daughters. They are business and faith leaders and care and service providers, and they are all essential to our state's economic prosperity and thriving communities. So that's sort of one thing that folks can do. Another thing that folks can do from the language access perspective is connect with folks who speak different languages than you, or take a language class if you want. Languages are really fun to learn, and it's really energizing to speak to someone in a language that is their own, or vice versa, and feel that connection happen. It's a very human process, and it's a really meaningful one, I will say, from my own experience. And then lastly, like you said, Teresa, if you're excited about language access, you're welcome to join the Colorado Language Access Coalition. If you want to get particularly involved, you can tell legislators why they should support this 2025 language access bill through a process called testimony, which means going to legislators and telling them live in person, live over video, or not live in written form, why you think this bill is important and why you want to support this bill. And we can help you do that. We can help you prepare that testimony. And then, of course, like I said before, folks are also welcome to join either of our other two advocacy coalitions on refugee and immigrant mental health, and on support for young kiddos in early childhood and early childhood education and care. And then the last thing I will say is for folks who are particularly excited about learning more about Spring Institute, we will be having our annual event in June on the 18th. And as we've done in the past, interested businesses can sponsor the event and at varying levels, and doing so show their support for our intercultural welcoming community in Colorado. So we'll link Spring Institute's website in the description, and you can refer to that in the coming months, and we'll have more information about that event on the page.
Yeah, that's amazing. Kate, thank you so much for all those ways to get involved, for what's going on this session, but also broadly, the context that we're in. This is super helpful, and just really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Really appreciate it.